Unmute.
Good morning. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Let's rise for the pledge, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty, justice for all. Good morning. Let's take the roll. Trustee Gluck.
Present.
Trustee McHugh.
Present.
Trustee Cohn.
Here.
Trustee Barnett. Mayor McFadden, present. Okay, so how would you like to start?
So I sent out a list of all of the potential ways that we could reduce the budget. I thought it'd be good if we could just go through each of the items, and if anybody wants to add anything, they can talk about it. And then we can talk about the costs and the impact of doing, costs in terms of reduction in appropriations. And then there's also some actually revenue opportunities potentially, and we can talk about those. Does that make sense? Just go down the list?
Yes, I just wanted to caution everyone that there are public people from the public that are in the call. So there's certain things on that list that we should talk about in an exec session.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, good. All right, so so we have that list before us. Why don't we start? I see there's initials on that list. Is that because you want those individuals to talk about that line item?
Yeah, I've asked those individuals to do research on those topics so they can talk about it.
Okay, when did that take place? Because I don't recall you telling me to do that.
Oh, anybody who came in with an idea, or I went individually to people. We had a meeting on Wednesday night, so Thursday I figured we better get going on this. So I talked to each of the trustees that were liaisons or whatever on the particular topics.
All right, so you didn't get my original email, which invited everyone to participate? That was before you got involved. I'm just curious if everyone got that because no one responded to me.
I'm not sure what email you're referring to.
Okay, I can send it out to you later. Did anyone here get my email about formulating a list? Okay, I'll resend it out. No big deal. Let's move on. So why doesn't someone take the floor and we'll start and go through the cuts?
Okay, so I will start with and I'm going to turn it over to Alan McHugh because he's done a bit of research on this. We had talked about at the meeting on Wednesday, a potential possibility we wanted to get a community feedback on and again, we hadn't explored any of this on Wednesday night because it was a significant, some of it we haven't explored, I should say, because some of it required significant cuts in service. One of them we talked about, which part of this will be discussed in the next session, is reducing police coverage. So Alan McHugh, are you there? Did we lose him? Alan McHugh? Looks like we may have lost him. Paul, did we lose Alan?
I see a box that says iPad 3.
Oh.
So.
Yeah. Oh, he's speaking now, I think. No,
Sorry.
Okay. Oh, there you are.
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I was just printing something.
Okay. So, Alan, let's talk about the economic impact of reducing police coverage. Are you ready to talk about that?
Yeah. I'm trying to just get back into this thing. So just give me. Okay, here we go. We've done. I worked with Denise and Chief just to get some ideas on possible alterations to the A-line shift, which is the evening shift. So as a frame of reference, and this is using part-time officers, and there's a whole slew of caveats associated with this. with regard to manpower staffing and full-time officer staffing. But I think just to frame the discussion, this is pretty good. If we were to do an A-line shift with just Monday through Friday and took it from 2 officers to 1 officers, that would be a savings of $58,240. On the weekends, if we were to eliminate the A-line shift with a whole slug of caveats, that would be $26,624. So that's how it's kind of boxed in there. I don't think it's appropriate in a public setting to discuss the relative merits and everything, and I'll defer to the mayor and David on that. I think that's more something for executive session, but I really wanted to really frame the dollars and cents implications from this. Assuming everything else constant, that would be the savings, but I think it would be a fool's errand to assume that everything would be constant basis. There most definitely would be savings, but there could be negative ramifications from this with regard to staffing part-timers and having to bring more full-timers in on the weekend, and our costs would go up as a result of that. So the net number most definitely would be a savings, but it's a question of order of magnitude.
Yeah, we had that discussion, Alan. We agree in terms of talking about some of these line items in executive session. I don't know. I think maybe you had just gone.
No, I heard it. I just didn't want anybody to ask me a question I didn't feel was appropriate to answer.
Absolutely.
So the savings would be, let's put a range in there, Alan, just for, just for a point of reference, anywhere from, depending upon what path you take, how many shifts you cut. So anywhere from, let's say, 25,000 to 75,000, maybe in that range.
Yeah, I think as an order of magnitude and with a high degree of confidence, that would be a reasonable range.
Okay. Okay. So any questions on that? I mean, again, there's a piece that talks about public safety and impact on police that we should talk about in executive session, but that's effectively the range. And we should obviously get the chief's input on whether or not that's something that would be too disruptive, which again, we can talk about in executive session.
Correct.
Okay. The next topic is, we talked about is like, assume no collective bargain agreement wage increases. And Alan, again, you've done the research on that. Do you want to take that topic?
Yeah. With regard to the DPW, we've got one employee retiring next fiscal year, which is Coco. But for each 1% increase in the equates to $4,000. Just as to make it a kind of a simplistic way of looking at it, a 1% raise across the board to the employees is $4,000.
And so we in the budget have a 2% raise assumed, correct? So that would roughly be an $8,000 savings if we had 0 increase. Is that right?
Right.
Okay. And okay. And then did you want to talk about the, yes, please. Sorry.
Okay.
Can I interrupt here for a sec, please?
Mm-hmm.
So I think in terms of talking about potential collective bargaining increases, it might want to consider that also being a subject for executive session.
Agreed.
Okay. And then again, just to be clear, we're just putting the numbers in a spreadsheet that I have, right?
Right.
So
A very
right
public spreadsheet.
Sorry?
I said it's a public spreadsheet. So
yeah.
So
yes.
That's why the suggestion would be, let's talk about this in exec session.
Okay. All right. So the increases are not public information. Okay. All right. And Al, so do people feel it's appropriate to talk about the what 1% increase costs for the police, for instance? I think that's fine.
I'm referring to personnel, names, as well as I think also with raises for the village employees. All of these things are off limits in a public session.
Right. So, yeah, and I'm not talking about personnel. So, Alan, would you mind saying what it costs 1% increase in salaries is roughly?
Using a similar methodology to what was used on the DPW, a 1% increase on a PBA is equivalent to just over $5,000. I'll just leave it that way.
Okay. And, okay, that's fine. The next item on the agenda that we talked about at the meeting the other day is reducing village office hours. And also I thought a good suggestion was maybe moving some of the office hours to Saturday. I think that would be that topic in general has to go into executive session. Anybody disagree or any questions that anyone has on that?
Oh, that's
topic?
fine. Let's move that to exec session.
Okay, the other topic that we talked about is reducing paving or eliminating paving. I'm going to turn again to Alan McHugh. Alan, would you want to talk about the discussion you had?
Certainly. I mean, you know, going back to the discussion we had on Wednesday night, and to be honest, this was instituted by Mary Jo, which is our roads have become dilapidated. We have between 25 and order of magnitude 25 to 30 miles worth of roads that are paved. The average lifespan of a road is 10 years. So just to maintain the roads, not milling them, stripping them down and rebuilding them, basically you have to do 2.5 to 3 miles a year. So what realistically we're talking about is reducing the amount of roads we would pave by 2/3, and then the rest of it would be repairing potholes. You know, if anybody's driven around Westlake Road, you see that road every year implodes part of it into Tuxedo Lake. Jeff has to get there, build gravel, put stones in, build it back up and redo it. So, you know, what we're having a dramatic change is the primary arteries obviously would get all the attentions, the second and tertiaries would not, and that would be the nature of the beast. My concern is you know, all you're doing is punting on this and pushing it on another administration rather than dealing with the reality of the situation. And, you know, I'll throw one thing out there that, you know, we've bandied around. It's certainly not in the public domain in any great way, which is the bridge between Pond Number 3 and the Weewa. That has chunks of the bottom of the part of the road deteriorated. The steel iron beams, our engineer noticed, had been weakened as a result of this. We did put notification in, I think it was December or January, with regard to a weight limit of vehicles going over that. The next step is we close that road down, because that would be to do a case in point of something we could not afford to do this fiscal year.
So, Alan, if we did want, your points are well taken, but if we did want to reduce paving or eliminate paving, roughly, you know, one suggestion would be to reduce it. You said 2/3?
Well, I'm saying the paving, realistically, you know, there's a twofold thing to Jeff's budget with regard to paving. One is the materials, and then you bring in an exterior contract, which is done by the Orange County Department of Public Works bid, and they do the repaving. And then there's the second component, which is Jeff's guys buying tar and filling potholes and doing small remedial work. So where you would see the dramatic reduction is on paving by an external contractor of our roads.
So if we took for argument's sake, 50%, we paved 50% less roads. So right now it's sorry.
No, I'm not. I'm saying it would be greater than that. because Jeff's budget is one in-house paving of potholes, and then the second is an external. Just to frame this whole discussion, doing Clubhouse Road, or finishing off Clubhouse Road, and going from the Tavani's old property on Mountain Farm up to the Pawtucket, up Pawtucket Road, to repave that is $90,000. That just gives you a kind of order of magnitude.
So in the budget currently, right, we have paving of roads is equal to, I think, $190,000. That's the cost for paving external.
That is, we originally had it in at 200. The budget workshop a week ago, Thursday, or a week ago, Friday, we agreed to reduce it by 10K.
And if to reduce it further, right? So let's say, for argument's sake, we took it from 190 to 50% of that, or to even 100. What impact would that have on paving of roads? How much less roads would be paved?
Well, what I'd say is, a case in point is, from the Tavani's old property up to the Pawtucket water tank is probably 3/4 of a mile of road. That's all you could do. And the rest would be Jeff managing potholes, and not, basically it would be a Band-Aid approach to managing our infrastructure.
I agree. It's whether or not we support it.
Right, but sorry, I was just trying to put it, I asked Jeff to frame it in the sense of how much road would actually be done on an X dollar amount. And then, so, people have a sense of how much it would cost to do something like that.
Yeah, thank you. And I actually, as I mentioned in 2 meetings ago, when I presented the budget that I had worked on to give back to you guys, and we had our discussion on line item by line item, I asked Jeff, and I mentioned this, to give me every $10,000, how much road is that? Did he give you that number?
Well, I mean, obviously you can divide it by, you're talking a 1/10 of a mile is ballpark 10K, 10 to 15K. But that yet again is assuming, we're not milling the roads, taking it down. We're just talking about putting a top coat on top of an existing. This isn't what we did on Lower Clubhouse Road last year, where we milled the road down, rebuilt it, changed the grade and everything, and did stuff like that. So we're talking, this isn't apples to apples. Okay.
So the concept would be, so I just have it correctly, Alan, see if I'm getting it right. There's a potential savings of $90,000 that has the consequence of just fixing a certain amount of potholes, frankly, in the village, and it eliminates the top coat paving that we had put into the budget.
Yes, and that's a fair characterization.
And then that, obviously, what your point is that, unfortunately, in many previous administrations, the can was kicked down the road on terms of capital improvements and fixing up the roads. And that's what one element of this would be, doing that if we've took the $90,000 out.
Correct.
Okay. Any comments or questions before we move on to the next one?
Sure. So if I'm understanding that correctly, so what we're saying down that, taking, that approach, we would be, these roads get paved when you can no longer fix them by fixing potholes, right? Because if you could just fix the pothole, you don't pave the road. When they're beyond pothole repair is sort of, as I understand, when Jeff would schedule a repaving. So in terms of impact.
Sorry, can I make a caveat to Paul? I think the other thing is, when you look at the curbing that they do and the drainage as a result of the deterioration of the curbing that's done on the side of the road, and that's undermining the road basin, that's the other thing. So I think it's
Right.
Yes, to your first point, but there's an ancillary thing, which is the curbing deterioration, which results in water seeping underneath the road and undermining the structure of the roadbed.
Right. So it's not so much just limiting it to saying, we'll just fix potholes. What you're saying is you're not, you're taking half the roads that are beyond pothole repair and not addressing those. And that's how I would
Frame it.
suggest looking at the characterization of that.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. That's a great clarification that I didn't appreciate. Okay, anything else on the reducing or eliminating paving of roads topic? Okay. One of the next topic is renegotiate garbage contract to reduce service. I spoke with the and people had talked about on Wednesday evening moving from we have concierge service, which means we get the garbage picked up generally at our homes, not down at the roads, at the end of our driveways. And we also have service 2 days a week for garbage pickup, 1 day a week for recycling. There was talk on Wednesday evening of considering renegotiating our garbage contract, which was, by the way, just entered into last year after much discussion and public comment, et cetera. But renegotiating that contract to eliminate 1 day of garbage pickup. So we'd have potentially concierge service and only 1 day of garbage and 1 day of recycling every week. So that was the discussion on Wednesday. I contacted, so there's two elements of that. Is it possible to renegotiate that garbage contract? And what is the process in renegotiating it if we were to renegotiate? And then the second one is what would be the cost savings if we did renegotiate and we're able to eliminate 1 day of garbage pickup a week? So we'll deal with the legal issue second, but on the first point, I spoke with with Sterling Carding yesterday, and the bottom line is eliminating 1 day of garbage pickup is would not reduce our expenses, or wouldn't reduce the contract costs if we were able to renegotiate, because effectively you have a certain amount of man hours to pick up garbage. And if we just pushed all the garbage pickup to 1 day, we have still the same amount of garbage, therefore the same amount of hours per ton of garbage. So actually cutting it to 1 day really does not help reduce any expenses. I asked them, well, what would reduce expenses? And they said, well, the one thing you could do is that you could have all residents, eliminate the concierge service, and you just have the garbage being picked up at the end of people's driveways, because it takes a lot of time for the garbage men to actually go up to people's driveways and get the garbage from somebody's house or right outside of the house or whatever. So if you eliminated the concierge service, then and had everybody put their garbage at the driveway, that would represent a significant man-hour savings. They were unable to tell me how much because basically we had 24 hours to discuss this, and they did raise whether or not the contract can be renegotiated. So on the topic of saving money, does anybody have any questions on that? And then we can go into the legal element. Anybody have any questions about what I learned from the carding company, who was very helpful in trying to help me figure this out, by the way? Any questions or comments on that?
No.
Okay, so John, I don't know if I'm waiting to hear from Brian exactly what the process would be. I don't know if you've got any color on that.
The extent of my knowledge is I saw the emails go back and forth, and obviously Brian gave his opinion that the term of the contract goes through, I think it was 2022. And so absent a breach, the village couldn't really simply just go out and rebid. I mean, you can always try to renegotiate. He gave a practical reason saying that the tipping fees have increased, so they might leverage that against you. And then I also saw your notes about the appendix. I haven't had a chance to conference with Brian about that yet. We can obviously give the board a full opinion on it. You know,
Yeah. John, I've got a question for you. What is the, procurement controllers guidelines with regard to procurement if you accept a bid and then for whatever reason it's expired, or can you renegotiate it, or do you just have to cancel it and then go out for rebid?
yeah, so I think when you bid, there's usually protections that we write into the bid itself, saying that, like a reservation of rights for the village, saying that the village has the right to reject any and all bids, and you also have the option to waive irregularities in bids and so forth. When you accept a bid, I mean, right now you accepted a bid and you entered into the contract. So the contract would necessarily, that would be the governing document right now.
Right, but the question is, let's say, and this is purely theoretical, let's say we elected to cancel the contract and there was a legal basis for doing that, which I think Maureen thought she might have found.
Right.
Basis that, can we just renegotiate with the current vendor, or do we have to rebid the contract, notice it in the paper, have a bid opening, and then award the lowest bidder or the lowest qualified bidder? I guess that's my question.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I don't know the answer right now, but I can be sure to get you one. It's a very good question.
Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
Alan Barnett, you have something to say? You're on mute, Alan. You got to take yourself off. Okay.
Yeah.
There you
I'd like to point out that we're talking about approximately $45, $47 a month to the for this concierge service, and we're talking about some people having long driveways, uphill driveways, where it's very, very convenient for them to have the garbage picked up at their house rather than hauling down to the curb. We'd have to probably have animal-proof, at least bear-proof cans at the curb. The question: how do you get those in current stay-at-home environment? And thirdly, we had nobody bidding on this contract, so it's not a particularly choice contract for garbage collectors. And then finally, the economics of recycling are closely tied to the price of oil, because of the great amount of oil that's in plastics. So the lower the price of oil, the less valuable plastics are, because they can't be economically recycled. So we're now competing in a situation where the profitability of recyclers certainly and has dropped. So I really think we ought to consider whether we want to go down this road.
Right. And we understand. Yeah, totally get that, Alan, because you're right. The rebidding, as Brian had also pointed out, may actually increase our costs ultimately. Whether or not first legal question is whether or not we have the right to rebid. As Alan pointed out, I think I found an opportunity to rebid if we wanted to. And you guys at your law firm can tell me if I was correct on that analysis. And then the bidding becomes very cumbersome and actually may be detrimental to us. I think at the next juncture, we can talk to them about renegotiating the contract if to get man-hour cost savings. If we want to eliminate that concierge service, which does seem pretty dramatic. But anyway, we can talk about all those elements after I've gone through the line items, if that makes sense. Okay, one of the other things we talked about is combining boards and streamlining building processes. This is one of the things that came out on Wednesday evening. I think Alan McHugh, you had a thought about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure there's an enormous cost savings with regard to that. I mean, the one thing is the bar does meet twice a month. We reduce that to once a month, and obviously we get some, you get some savings with regard to the recording secretary being there, and so there are some cost savings. I mean, order of magnitude is probably $2,000 to $4,000, but it's one way of saving some money, but it comes at a potential price too.
Right. Okay, any questions about that? All right, moving on.
I'm sorry, yeah, if I may. Alan, if you were to take the revenue generated by permits or the billing we do for attorneys at each meeting or the billing we do for engineering at each meeting, did you weigh that against the potential savings? Because in other words, each time the bar meets, there's a potential for revenue.
Yeah, but the revenue would still be there. It would just be, instead of meeting twice a month, it would be once a month. So what the key to me is, I don't think we should be increasing the fees and the revenues, the fees with regard to appearing before the bar and the planning board, because we want people to come and appear.
Right, no, I'm not advocating for that at all. Of course we want people to come. I was just referring to, I guess it's a cash flow issue in the sense that we're getting revenue at 2 points a month rather than one. Same revenue total, but we're getting it on a cash flow basis. It's better for us if it's every 2 weeks.
If theoretically it worked that way, that would be true, but the practical side of it, it doesn't work that way. Really, you get a one-off when people do put the permits in, so it's front-end loaded. So you don't get that benefit that you're talking about going through really. So the good news is it's front-end loaded with regard to revenue. What we're talking about is how great an inconvenience, and it would be more a staffing reduction in cost is what we're talking about with regard to that. It's more analogous to, reduced village office hours. This would be one way of doing it to get some incremental savings.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the next element is that is working with our legal consultants to see if we can come up with some framework to reduce our retainer fees from our legal consultants, and we'd have to be creative on that, and it would mean that we'd limit our access to our lawyers. Paul, I don't know, you were going to look at that. I don't know if you've had any thoughts.
Well, yeah, so I've reached out to have a conversation with Brian about that, but that has not yet occurred. I would say, I mean, there's whatever dollar amount could be achieved by doing that would be a savings. We've tried that in the past, and what has happened really is that we find that we really don't save money by doing that, because particularly if you're limiting your counsel's presence at a meeting, invariably things come up when they're not there, and then it involves chasing them down and costing more money at the end of the day, because you then can't do it in the context of a meeting, and you have one or two people having a conversation, and that conversation then has to get repeated back among other board members. So it winds up at the end of the day potentially costing more, although it's less hours at a particular meeting.
Right. But we're still going to explore it. You're going to talk to Brian and see if there's a way
Sure.
to, like, one of the thoughts we had is limiting the amount of time the lawyers spend at a meeting. Like,
By the way, I'm on. Sorry, I got on a few minutes ago, Brian. So I'm here.
Oh, I think Paul's has reached out to you, and he just wants to close up a conversation about ways we could reduce the consulting fees by, limiting the amount of time or reducing the amount of time spend it on us. Paul's gonna have some creative.
Yeah, we could talk about that, but I think you could look at March as an example that, you know, we put in double what your retainer is in time. So I'm not sure, you know, you need significant reductions. You guys are over significantly on time as it is now, you know, averaging out your retainer. But we can have that conversation, and you could look at those numbers. But if you had been billed hourly in March, it would have cost you twice as much as what you paid.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and Brian, the concept is not squeezing you down in profits. The concept is reducing those hours and figuring make us maybe even more disciplined in using time. And that's really what
Right,
sort of,
right. But I'm just saying you're not billed by the hour right now. So I'm fine with that. I'd rather go hourly, to be honest with you, with the village, because the retainer kills us right now, not you.
no, and I understand that, but Paul will talk to you about it. Again, we're not suggesting hourly billing. We're suggesting more limit, not killing you.
Well, then there's no savings.
Well, right. That's what I'm saying. There's no savings. Right now, you're getting the better end of the deal by a long shot. So I'm saying, you know, you think we'll talk about that, but you got to look at that. You're not going to save anything, but the fact is you're getting far more out of your retainer than you should be.
No, and yeah, we get that. So anyway, I understand. I totally understand that. Yes, and I know that you guys have been working many hours above. It's amazing, and thank you very much, by the way. But anyway,
Was that
You're welcome.
a hint, Brian, why you sent us that bill the wrong way on Wednesday's invoice?
No, honestly, that bill was because we changed our system to actually have a comparative rate in there, which we didn't. So that was actually one of the first times we saw the dollar amounts too, because there just wasn't a comparative, meaning like a non-retainer rate in there to see what, you know, the bills would be, because we obviously like to look at all our retainers, and, you know, we're obviously in a lot of municipalities, and some of those are starting to conflict. So we have to look at, you know, our situation as well. And so that just happened to be because we put in a rate where before that was a zero. It just shouldn't have put it on the bill as a total. It was supposed to be just a flat fee, but it would show us, in other words, here's kind of where here's the time you're putting in and the cost of that time.
Right. So just so everybody's clear, I think the bill you sent us was, if you'd billed us per hour, I think the bill was around $12,400, whilst our monthly retainers around $5,800, right, Brian?
That's exactly correct.
and that's a good point. And so thing here, but we had to put it on the list. Okay, moving down, unless anybody has any more comments or questions. Moving down the list, we have two items that are related: Lakes management budget and no treatment of EWM and coontail this year. Paul, did you want to take those?
Sure. Well, so the lakes management approach we were taking and discussed at the last meeting involved, out of the general budget, about $11,000 for water milfoil treatment or mitigation on the Weewa, and about about $14,000 for lakes milfoil treatment on Pond 3. So those are the numbers. And I guess in addition to that, there would be we have about $4,000 for booms to prevent fragmentation from going downstream in our lakes. And there's about $20,000 in collective continued, analysis and surveying on Pond 3 and the Weewa from our lakes consultant.
Which, Paul, can I just add something, given we continually are getting updates from New York State Federation of Lakes and everything, the likelihood of us doing CSLAP this year is ever decreasing as a result of the coronavirus. So we have a great data set with regard to the CSLAP numbers, the likelihood of us being able to continue that this year is greatly reduced. So the testing by our lakes manager becomes that much more important as a result of that.
Right.
It's just my 2 cents. Sorry.
Sure. So pond number 3 and the Weewa are not in the same condition as Tuxedo Lake. Tuxedo Lake, you remember, is sort of fully, it's just about as bad as it could get in terms of milfoil. We are still at a position now where, particularly with regard to the Weewa, where there's light and scattered milfoil, in a position where that could be managed at a relatively low cost as compared to what it would take to deal with that if you had to put it off a year or two. I think these are sort of the classic case of saving some dollars today, but having to spend a lot more down the road to deal with it if it's not addressed while it's still relatively light.
So Paul, that's the Weewa, and that's $11,000, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And so your point is that, we're becoming penny wise and a pound foolish ultimately, by potentially putting it off for another year because it could get much worse and cost us a lot more to remediate the situation. Okay. Right? Am I getting it right?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And then, so on pond 3, what is the view? Because that's a $15,000, a $14,000, excuse me, line item or item. What's the view on pond 3?
Well, pond 3 has more relative to the Weewa, less relative to Tuxedo Lake. It gets, if you don't treat it, it gets worse, as well as being a greater feed to the downstream lake. So would it make sense not to, deal with the invasive in pond 3, but deal with it in the Weewa? No, I wouldn't think so. And it's not a question of really being able to partially treat something.
Right.
It's not like a road where you can, you could treat half the lake or pave half the roads in the village. You either have to address it or let it go, and assess the relative costs of letting it go.
Okay. And then, so I get that. And the boons for fragmentation is a similar issue.
Right.
And then the continued analysis of pond 3 and Weewa, the water quality analysis or the analysis.
Right.
Alan McHugh made the point that $20,000 is because of what's going on in as a result of the coronavirus, that keeping an eye on the water quality and situation is becoming increasingly important. Am I getting that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then Tuxedo Lake, is there anything in the budget to treat or do anything?
Remember, Tuxedo Lake is a completely different budget. So that's
water. You're right. Sorry. I apologize. Yes. Okay. So there's a potential savings of $25,000, but a very big risk that we're going to, or actually more than 25,000. You do the 11, 14, and 4, so that's $29,000 potential savings, but there's substantial risk that it's going to cost us way more than that in subsequent years because we're letting the situation get worse. Is that right?
I'd say that's fair.
Okay. Any questions on that? All right. The next item we have on the agenda is the license plate reader. This is one of the items that came up when the mayor went to the chief and said, cut 10%. And the chief said, okay, we can cut out the license plate readers, which cost about $11,000 a year. That item and the last budget workshop, all 5 of us agreed that that item is something that's important to the village from a safety perspective, et cetera. And we decided that it was not something that made sense to cut at that time. However, if we're looking for dramatic cuts, that is something that could reduce our budget by $11,000. And again, I think we need to talk about that in executive session because of the safety related issues.
Oh, just a comment. I never asked the chief to cut 10%.
Okay, sorry. I'm sorry. That I thought that's what that was being done. Okay. So, but that came as a result of that conversation, which was great. It was on the, became an item that we could consider. So anybody have any questions or comments on that? Any other questions or comments?
No,
Okay.
I mean, yep.
Sorry, Alan.
No, I've got nothing to say.
Okay. Next item is recreation. And there's a line item of $1,000 for recreation. I think because last year or the year before, there was some event that we spent roughly $1,000 on. So I think that item kept rolling over, if I'm getting that correct. And that's something that we could cut from the budget as well, which means we won't participate in like a tuxedo day or thank the first responders. I forgot exactly what that line item was. And I don't remember us spending it last year. It was the year before, I believe. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any comments on that or questions? Okay, it's $1,000. Alan McHugh, the next item is in the budget. I noticed a line item for street cleaning. And I don't know if you've any color on that, or you spoke to Jeff, if there's any reductions possible there, or, you know, again, it could be draconian impact.
Yeah, I mean, the line item on street cleaning is 4K.
Okay.
And that's the Zamboni going around the park, cleaning the roads at the end of the winter, and to remove the debris in order to, you know, reduce the wear and tear on everybody's cars and have less things. And obviously, you know, I'm not sure that's, you know, we already own the Zamboni, so it's personnel hours going around the park and doing that. So I think it's more a question of, do we want to allocate personnel hours to do that versus something else? And obviously, I think that ties in more with, you know, we had Stevie, who ran the sewer plant, retire 2 or 3 years ago. We did not replace him. We've got Coco retiring. Do we choose not to replace him? What are the consequences, and what things can Jeff no longer do as a result of that? Those are really the questions that we need to deal with. And that's kind of ties in with what the discussions we had last week with regard to outsourcing management of our sewer plant, whether that frees up labor hours. That's a more cost-effective way to manage our DPW labor force. So I would defer that to executive session, but those are the considerations.
Okay, great. The next item on the agenda is not something that's currently in the budget, but that I personally think we need to consider it, is that there's a $16,000 cost associated with that the village would pay above and beyond all of the donations that have received. That $16,000 relates to redundant equipment, and that's something that we should you know, consider in this whole process, whether that's something we can afford to fund the redundant equipment. But I think that that's a longer discussion, but I did want to put it on the list as something that.
Excuse me, would you please put it into context? You're talking about the booth.
Oh, I'm sorry. I never said booth. I apologize. Yes, I'm
Thank
reading
you.
it. Yeah, it's the booth. I apologize. Yes, it's the booth construction, and the $16,000 relates really to redundant equipment. And maybe there's something that can be done there. First of all, it's not in the budget currently. And if we wanted to put in the budget, it would be a $16,000 additional appropriation, which is obviously going the wrong way. So that's just something we have to put a pin in at this moment. Okay. Any comments? Okay. And I don't know if there are any infrastructure projects. The one infrastructure project is the I&I project that we've been working on for 2 years, at least 2 years, more than 2 years. But the I&I project is something that sort of we have to do for the DEC. We've made promises, et cetera. We've gotten a grant, and there's funding in the budget for that carried over from this year. I think, Alan McHugh, that's the only infrastructure project that's in the budget, right?
With regard to the general budget, yes.
Yes. General budget I'm focused on. And the mayor, this was one of your thoughts. I didn't know if you had anything specific that you were thinking about.
I know, I proposed the question.
Okay, all right, thanks. And then I think the rest of, there's a couple other items that relate on the appropriation side that relate to things that we cannot talk publicly about. So then I would turn to, that are for executive session. They relate to personnel. The next topic, or the other side of this is possible opportunities to increase revenues. So, sorry?
Sorry.
Yeah, the first item is storage unit fees. Alan McHugh?
All right. We've got eight storage units at the village office. We charge $150 a month. We tightened it up, one going to market rates, I guess it was 2 years ago, Paul, and we tightened the language because we had a receivable issue too. So one, our collections has been improved, and two is we went to a higher market rate. That being said, demand outstrips supply. So should we increase our monthly rental unit rates? We currently bring in $14,400. Next thing is a certificate of occupancy fees. We, in 2019-20, we got around 20 requests for this. Usually it's a function of home sales and interest rates, but we only charge $100. I personally think we could treble that amount, and we get it. We wouldn't lose the business because people need it, and this is in the scheme of things is an inconsequential charge, but it is revenue for the village. We have non-resident tags. We have people coming in using our infrastructure. Last year or this year we budgeted $19,200. The question is, what's the elasticity of demand? Do people go the inconvenience of waiting at the front gate is more than offset by the cost of the tag? Obviously, we're going to get a lot of negative pushback from people trying to come from the golf course through the South Gate entrance, but there's a revenue there. Boat and dock fees. We're talking a lot about enormous sums of expenses spent on the lake. We increase our fees there. What's the elasticity of demand? Can we double that? We collect $16,200 there. Weewah Beach Club, we don't charge any licensing fee. Do we start charging a licensing fee? Weewah Fishing Club, we charge $400 per annum as a licensing fee. Do we increase that fee? Village Boat Club, we do not charge any fees for that. There's greater demand than supply there. Do we all of a sudden start charging for usage taxes in order to increase revenue? Obviously, these are not popular, but nothing's popular with regard to these, but these are levers that we have at our disposal to increase revenue.
Okay. So just to give orders of magnitude for argument's sake, so if we increase the storage units, just for argument's sake, by $50 a month, we charge $150 per month. And then if we did it but just by $50 a month, let me just, oops, sorry, I'm doing the wrong math. That would increase, provide roughly $4,800 in additional revenue. If we charge anything from the Village Boat Club or Fishing Club or Beach Club, any basically, any increase would obviously go directly to the bottom line. And I think some of those, as you said, are not getting charged currently. So we should probably discuss, what would be the type of increase in fees that we would consider so that we can put that out in the public domain so that they understand the impact. Okay. So I think we've covered the increase in the certificate of occupancy fees. We talked about that.
Yeah, I alluded to it. It's currently $100. my personal opinion is we should treble it, make it $300, and it's time intensive for our employees. I don't think we've been charging an appropriate sum, and it's completely inelastic. It's not as if us, by increasing the price, people aren't going to have to get it done. So that's one of the few things where we don't need to worry about elasticity.
So if we had 20 a year, that
We could take it from $2,000 to $6,000.
Yep. So an additional $4,000, right?
Yeah.
Okay, the village. Did you want to, Alan? Would it make sense to just go through your thoughts about what would be appropriate increases for each of these for discussion?
To be honest, I feel like I'm the bad boy bringing these up, because these have been pet peeves of mine for quite a few years. And, you know, people don't like user taxes, but, you know, people who use Tuxedo Lakes and boats.
Okay, so
Great problems, and we're all having to deal with them. And our budget for lakes management has gone from, I think in 2012, it was $5,000 to $10,000. Now we're up to $150,000. And I think people can rightly say the situation has gotten worse every year. And now it's finally got to a point where people are recognizing the problem. But as a result of us delaying and doing a piecemeal approach, the problem went from one order of magnitude to an exponentially larger problem. So, you know, somebody has to pay for it.
Okay, so then I'll give you the numbers. So I'll just come up with numbers and we can discuss it. Increase in storage unit fees, $150 to $200 per month. That results in $4,800 of additional revenue. Discussion. Anyone have any comments? I think that's a reasonable, as you said, it hasn't been raised in a long time. Demand is outstripping supply. So I think that's a reasonable charge. So it's basically increasing the fees $600 per unit.
Yeah, just so we're clear, it was raised, I believe, 2 years ago, Paul, right?
That sounds about right.
Yeah, so it was raised 2 years ago. We haven't increased it, and we still have a waiting list.
Okay. So I think $50 is a reasonable monthly increase based on those factors. Anybody disagree? Okay, Village Boat Club fees. Currently the fees charged are?
Zero.
Okay. And is there a rationale for not charging the boat club? I mean, as you said,
I'll defer to Paul on this, because you're the Village Boat Club rep.
Liaison, actually.
Sorry.
Is there a rationale? I guess you'd have to go back to how and why the Village Boat Club was organized, which is a little bit before my time. But my understanding was that there was a sort of a legal dispute among property owners, certain property owners in the village, who claimed that there was an unfair taxation in effect occurring because they were paying taxes but did not have any access to Tuxedo Lake. And the accommodation to settle that was to allow greater access to Tuxedo Lake through the Village Boat Club. So that's sort of the rationale of why it is there, and what that access is.
I'll just add to that, Paul. The boat club was actually approved when I was mayor the first time, and you're 100% correct. That was the argument.
Okay. So, perfect.
So it's sort of, I guess I have sort of a hesitation about, the approach on fee structure here.
Okay.
And it goes kind of across the board on most of these. Normally, what we would do if we were thinking about increasing user fees of this nature, some of which I think are the function of past resolutions, some may be built otherwise into the village code, I don't know, is to put out some sort of advance notice so that the public can come in and weigh in on whether or not these these increases should take effect.
Yeah,
That's-
but Paul, we're not saying, we're hypothecating right now. We're not putting something, we're going general public, these are considerations.
Yes.
And,
Right.
we're not saying we're going to do $50 or we're going to double the non-resident tags by doubling that. We're going, this is incremental revenue that could allow us to balance the budget, and you taxpayers we would not have to go through the tax cap. That is what we're talking about. So, I mean, how many slips are there at the Village Boat Club? 20?
Don't know.
I don't know. 15?
I would just, if I can interrupt, I don't
Sure.
think we need to raise any fee at all to get down to the cap. And I think that this is just a substitute for another tax increase. So, I don't even understand why we're going here. I presented a budget to you that brought us within the cap last week, and none of these fees were required.
Yeah,
So-
but, sorry, none of the fees are required, but we would have no road paving. I don't, to me, that's not a trade-off I would remotely subscribe to or be willing to accept.
So I guess just
So
for,
just let me, so
Sorry.
going back to the point, I guess, understanding that we're just talking about these hypothetically, I'm just saying in order to build them into a budget for next year, we just have to think about the potential timing for that and ensure that, I think if we go down the road on any of these, we need to build in, a little bit of we need to build in a notice period before they're actually adopted.
okay.
I accept that, but with regard to, for example, Weewa Beach Club, Weewa Fishing Club, Village Boat Club, it would be effective March 31st, 2021, which would be in our budget year, but would solve the hole, fill the hole. That's all I'm saying. So that's a year's notice. I don't think that's, in the scheme of things, remotely unreasonable.
And just to be clear, again, there's these cuts. What I heard on Wednesday, and I totally resonate, is these cuts are not related necessarily to getting below the tax cap. It's getting to the lowest tax base, appropriation base that or tax increase that we possibly can achieve. And that, to me, could mean flat to last year, if people were willing to accept some of these massive service service changes, service cuts. So again, my goal is not just to get below the tax cap here. I think our goal should be to get the lowest tax base, tax appropriation level that we can. Okay, so just to go through, just so we're again finishing through this, we put something out there in terms of thoughts on where it could go. Village Boat Club fees. If I would throw out $1,000 as the fee. Reasonable, not reasonable. We'll hear public comment on that, but I would put that out as a.
I mean, I see that as eminently reasonable.
Okay. Anybody think it should be higher? Okay. Increase in a certificate of occupancy fees. I take your proposal of $300 as being a reasonable occupancy fee, CO fees. Anybody disagree? Think it should be higher, lower? Should stay where it is? Okay. Weewa Boat Club. What is that right?
Beach
Club. Sorry, Beach Club. I'm sorry. What are the fees currently charged to the Weewa Beach Club?
Last year it was $0. Prior years it's been $1.
Is there a reason there's no fees? Paul, do you know? history on that as well? You know the history on everything, it seems.
Well, I guess the history there is that the Weewah Beach Club has been struggling for a number of years. Both as a result of the dam construction and before that in terms of membership. It is, the framework there is a relatively low membership fee. There at some point in the past had been a more significant fee. It escapes me of what it was. It was $3,000, I think, or maybe $5,000 a year. That was then just turned around to capital improvements. And what happened essentially was with the struggles that the Beach Club had been going through, that fee was eliminated. And if there were capital improvements, the village built that into its own budget. So
Okay.
that's the reason why it is currently zero.
Yeah.
There's no reason other than the ability of people to afford the membership fee why it couldn't be increased.
Okay, so and in the past there was a fee, but it was used for capital improvements, and it was basically it was a recycling of the money effectively, is what you're saying. So okay, I mean I think to be consistent with the boat club and what I would going to propose on the fishing club, we should have a fee, but this may not be the year that because of what's happening in coronavirus, they may not be able to open the beach club. So it may not be the year to impose a fee. If any fee, it would be a modest fee. When I say modest, like the normal, I would try to be consistent with the boat club, which would be $1,000. But again, I don't think this is the year to impose that because they're probably not going to be able to open Memorial Day weekend, unfortunately. They may not be able to. So at this point, I would not propose an increase in the Weewah Beach Club fees for this year. Does anybody? From zero. Does anybody disagree?
Well, I think that one's an open book, given we don't know how things are going to unfold. So I think that's a huge question mark.
Right. So that's why it's.
Well, you actually have the Village Boat Club in sort of possibly the same situation, because the Village Boat Club has sort of two components. There are a small number of boats there that are privately owned, but the vast majority of the members in the boat club utilize shared boats down there, both electric and human powered. So the boat club, except for the small number of privately owned boats, are operating under the same strictures more or less as the beach club in terms of being able to operate a launch. They're a non-essential business in effect. So they are closed down as well.
They're currently closed down, so none of their quote unquote group owned boats are not in use right now.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. That changes, in my opinion, the fee structure for this year. So I guess in line, I mean, there is a little difference because people are able to privately use their privately owned boats. But I would propose then that we don't have an increase or we don't impose a fee this year for either the boat club or the beach club. And what about the fishing club? Is there any impact of Corona on the fishing club?
Well, they like everything else, they have shared boats. I think there's four boats there. The one unique thing about them is, one, they're already paying $400 a year, but unlike the others, they utilize the lake throughout. Sorry, 6 boats a year, but they utilize that facility year round because they go out and ice fish and everything. Obviously, ice fishing is slightly different, and we need a winter in order for them to do that. That being said, they do stock the lake privately, so they're in consultation with the DEC and the fisheries with regard to that. So they have a fee of $400, which is dramatically higher than anybody else. But on top of that, they're actually stocking the lake for us, which, you know, Tuxedo Club used to. I believe Tuxedo Club's announced that they are not going to stock Tuxedo Lake this year. And in our budget considerations and discussions with regard to Tuxedo Lake, I don't think there's been any discussion about stocking the lake this year from our lakes manager, has there, Paul?
Oh, boy. I believe that our lakes manager recommended not stocking the lake with respect to one species, but continuing with respect to the other species.
Right, and to that point, we don't have that budgeted.
Right.
Okay, so I think that those fees are, in light of what's going on in the world, I think, and what they do, I think those fees are currently acceptable, and I wouldn't propose.
Correct, but I just want to be clear, if we're going to impose this, and I take heed of what Paul said, it's not for this season. We're getting caught up between this summer season and our fiscal year. So, you know, all our boat revenues come in April, May, as everybody puts their boat in the water, and we have our DPW steam cleaning the boats and everything. So what we're talking is next 2021, but that's in our fiscal year 2021. So that's the nuance. So I'm not saying we do it this year. I'm saying we're doing it the next calendar year, which is going to be 2021 fiscal year. So there's a timing issue. I just want to make sure we're
Okay. So, and I'm only dealing with the coming fiscal year, the budget. So there's nothing that's going to go in the budget for increase.
No, but I'm saying it would go in the budget, Maureen, because it is applicable. Because
it's May of next year.
April, May of next year.
Okay, I apologize. Okay, so then thank you for pointing that out. So as then Village Boat Club, right? That's for next year's budget. So I go back to let's have $1,000 in there because it's not hopefully not impacted by Corona.
Correct.
Okay. Anybody disagree? Will the boat club fees? I would do. Sorry, the beach club fees. I'm sorry. How do people feel about $1,000 charge again for next year?
I'll just cut in momentarily to remind everyone, I'm not responding to every question because I've already stated that I don't believe we need to raise any of these fees. So
I appreciate that. Yeah.
So my comment is Village Boat Club, Weewah Beach Boat Club, Weewah Fishing Club. You move them all up to you establish it at $1,000, and we give them sufficient notice period, and we can have public discussion with regard to it throughout this summer. And then it would become, depending upon those discussions, it would go into effect January of next year, or we would do it for the following season.
Okay, great. I have that in there. Okay, anybody object to that? Obviously, the mayor said he objects. So, but anybody else object or comment on that?
Well, I guess it depends on what we're doing here. I thought what we are kind of doing is listing, you know, a grouping of potential cost savings or revenue generators that would be for public consumption. Look, I think every tax dollar is important, and every $1,000 of tax dollars is important. But for most of these, considering the, you know, the impact on the budget is so minimal, and I would be, you know, kind of disinclined to favor doing these, but I have no problem in listing them as, you know, potential items for, you know, for discussion and public consumption.
Yeah, but Paul, I'm looking at these. You take the sum total of these. It could be 30K in revenue. That's not inconsequential.
The sum total, yes. I'm talking about You know, I'm
Yeah.
thinking mainly like the Weewa Beach Club, Weewa Fishing Club, and, you know, the Village Boat Club fees are, you know, are $3,000. That's, you know, that's, I don't know, it's like, you know, it's such a, it's impactful on the users, but it has so.
But if you take that argument,
Budget.
doing a 1% raise with the police department who provide us with public safety, that's inconsequential using that argument.
I'm not saying I'm in favor of that either. All
Yeah,
I'm saying
but
is
I
we're
mean,
listing these.
yeah,
We're listing these, but like the mayor, I would say when it came time to a vote on this, yes or no, I would probably be disinclined on those three to vote yes, but let's put it on the list and, you know, get reaction.
So
right.
you're,
And I guess, sorry, my response to that is the only one, and I'm torn on that one, the one I'm slightly sympathetic to is the Village Boat Club. With regard to the fishing club and the Weewa Beach Club, half of the members are coming, are not taxpayers in the park. So, you know, but they're using our infrastructure and getting the benefit of what we're spending to beautify this place and make it safe. So I'm more sympathetic to the Village Boat Club than the other two, where we should, it's not taxpayers aren't deriving exclusively the benefit. That would be my comment there.
so your point is well taken, Paul and Alan. The point, and again, I want to reiterate, the point of this is that we are listing all of the potential items where we could help reduce the increase in taxes and the consequences of that. So I think that, and this is not a vote, but this is something that we put out to the public, and we're going to vote on this next, I guess, week. But I think it's our responsibility and our agreement to put out everything that, you know, I don't agree with some of the things, obviously, on the expenditure, cutting the expenditures, but they're still on the list. Right. And then we can walk back from that or not. But we really should put them out there and try to get as much public comment as we can.
Correct, and I believe that was the intent of this meeting.
Exactly.
This is not to set policy or to agree on the budget. This is to go, these are a myriad of options. Some of them are under consideration, some of them are not, some are viable, some are not. But these are the factors that we have looked at, and these are the different levers.
Got it. I totally agree. Okay. Next item is non-resident tags. Alan, I'm going to give that to you, only because you have the information.
Sorry, non-resident tags, we have it budgeted this year $19,200. We're light on that this fiscal year. The question is, we haven't increased those tag fees in the last 3 years. We got a lot of negative pushback from the Tuxedo Club, less so from the people at Tuxedo Park School. The interesting thing is, it was more vociferous complaints from the Tuxedo Club, but that has a greater effect on the membership because they like to come in and out through the south gate. With regard to TPS, the demand is more elastic because their argument is they're only coming in the park twice a day. So we saw a drop off in demand as a result of that. Does that mean, you know, we shouldn't nudge up the rates? That's certainly a question. What's the appropriate number? We have seen a tail off in demand when we took it. I think we started at 60 and now we're up at $85. And we can look at the data set, but we did see a drop in demand as a result of that. But that could also be a function of lower enrollment at TPS and the Tuxedo Club.
Can I make a suggestion that we just do what Maureen said, which is list the things that we may or may not cut for the public consumption, but not debate each one right now. We're not going to debate on what's going on the list. Debates we seem to be having are what effect it will have. I think we can do that afterward.
Well, what I wanted to do, though, Mayor, is put down a, like a, you know, a line that says how much we increase.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and also I think that we have to tell people what the what the impact is for, and whether or not everything on this list is going to go to the public at this point, because I think we should go through it and say what totally doesn't make sense, like the garbage contracts may not make
Right.
sense.
But we're stepping ahead. In other words, if we
Yeah.
just give the public a list and they tell us what they'd like to do, then it's up to the board to debate it and
Right.
determine whether we accept it. And we don't need to do that right now. We just need to get a list out.
Yeah, plus the impact meaning financial impact. So the
Yeah.
non-resident tax,
So can we make this easy it's approximately 210 tags that we have. So a $10 increase is 2,000 on our bottom line. Let's just make it easy that way.
okay. So it's $10, and you said it was 210 tax, but we'd
Yeah.
have some.
$2,100 revenue by increasing $10.
And then boat and dock fees?
Boat and dock fees, I mean, you know, pontoon boats are $250, Duffy's $200, all others $100. I think we've got two issues there. One is I certainly think we can increase the rate for that, but more importantly, we also need to police it far better. We've had the last couple of years, it's been woefully abused with regard to number of people out on the lake without valid tags, and you know, having a better enforcement mechanism, either by public shaming or increased police diligence. And you know, it's something that I've had some discussions with the chief about.
So are you proposing or thinking that maybe there's an increase in some of the amounts?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
So what should we be putting out there? Increase a pontoon fee to what?
Well, let's just make it, to make it easy, the total budget we get is $16,200. So a 10% increase is $1,600.
Okay, so increase 10% the fees across the board, which is $1,600. Got it.
Yeah, I'm just using
Yep.
that as a benchmark.
Yep, got it. Totally get it. Okay, so just, we finished the list. Is there anything else anyone wants to add to the list? Did anybody hear anything from the public about items that we should add to the list? No? Okay, anybody have anything to add to the list? Okay, anything that we should be taking off the list at this stage? And everyone should have the list in front of them. Okay,
Yeah, I mean, I would just like to say that it's clear to me that we could go below the tax cap, because if you look at the last budget that I presented after speaking with the department heads and presented to you, it was at the cap. And we didn't have to go into a lot of these cuts that are pretty severe in terms of services. So I think we should be starting, that should be our starting point.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
we should use these things we've been discussing today as a way to get down to where we are at 1% or something below that. And it's clear that we could do that now, because I'm looking at the cuts you're recommending here to at least put on the table. So I think that we should use the budget that was presented on the April 1st budget, which, as again, went to the cap, and then work from there with the things we're talking about today to get it even further below the tax cap.
All right, so I'll give you my response. I mean, I don't accept what you presented, because ravaging our road paving is just passing the buck. That was 200K savings there.
No, it's just not an accurate characterization of.
But no,
It's not an accurate characterization of the paving.
Dave,
But
you
you know, I can demonstrate that later when we're
Okay.
offline. So we
that's
don't have to
fine, but let me
waste
finish
time here in the meeting.
my piece now, because David got to say is, you said 200K reduction in paving. You said 20K in sewer personnel. As we discussed at the meeting, it's a far more nuanced to say you can just cut 20K in sewer personnel when we're in non-compliant with the DEC and our flow management
The
plan.
discussion was about whether we needed one or two people, and
No.
we did not have a mandate from the DEC at the time, Alan. So that was, you know,
Mac, it is Alan's turn to speak, please.
excuse me,
All
excuse
I'm
me,
saying-
excuse me, Maureen. I gave you the floor from the beginning. You and Alan have talked quite a lot, and I'm adding my 2 cents every once in a while. I have the right to do that. And I would appreciate it if you didn't cut me off.
Sorry. So I respect that, and I think we all respect each other that we're not going to cut each other off. That being said, let's just call a spade a spade. What the cuts you had were 200 paving, 20K sewer personnel, and the only thing the chief could really do was cut the code red. And we all agreed we could get rid of the code red because of this pixel system that he thought would be adequate with regard to that. That was the one thing we agreed on. With regard to sewer personnel, we can't, budgeting from fancy and going, we hope something's not going to happen, to me is not a prudent way to run the village. So you know what? We've got a lot of variables, and that's why we needed to go into executive session, because this whole issue of a retirement of a DPW employee, the potential outsourcing of managing our sewer plant could increase our costs in the short term, but have profound long-term reduction in cost of the village because we won't have legacy costs. So, I don't want us to be myopic and go, okay, let's slash and burn here, but just punt the ball down the line, which is my concern about what this is with not investing in our infrastructure and our capital. I mean, we've dodged a bullet the last 3 years. We had a water plant that people had not invested in. We were in violation with the Department of Health. We had to refurbish both of our water filters. We dodged a bullet with regard to one of our pumps at Turtle Point pumping station. I mean, that's not a business model that anybody wants to run with. It's just irresponsible as far as I'm concerned.
Mayor, did you want to comment? Okay. I don't know if he's online. I don't know what happened. Sorry. He's
No, I'm sorry. I said Alan and I will just have to agree to disagree.
okay. I understand.
In terms of how he's interpreting my reductions in a certain way. He characterized them irresponsible and other things like that. And I'm just telling you that I disagree with him, and I agree to disagree. So there's no point in belaboring it here.
Okay. So, anybody else want to make a comment on the list? And anyone else want to make a comment? Does anyone want to take anything off the list? The only thing I would think of at this point is the garbage contracts, but I would still like to understand, because there's legal issues around that and bids and everything, that may not be something we want to really go down the path or have the ability to go down the path. However, I would like to know if residents in the next negotiation of the contracts, whether residents would be willing to give up the concierge service for whatever we can figure out what the impact would, try to figure out what the impact would be. But it was.
Well, I have a question, comment, thought here on that. It's not so much changing that, because I think that's difficult to do. But one avenue you could take is to potentially build in a user fee for the concierge service, and have those residents who wish to have that service, in effect, reimburse the village for for that.
Okay. I will say that will be, I think there's an offset of that in cost for office and figuring out who does it, and also in the garbage contractors, making sure that they get that correct as well. But we can put that in the potential comments, if that makes sense.
And it sort of raises the question of whether people, residents in the village, want to pay the extra, what is it, $500 a year, or whatever the number comes out to be for that service.
Right. Yeah, exactly. No, I get it. So I'll put that in there. And then I'll circulate it to everybody. Anything else that anyone wants to take off the list or put on the list, or? Okay. then I think that the next step is that we go into executive session. We go into executive session to discuss some of the personnel issues that could impact the budget. Does that make sense? Am I getting that right?
I would change language slightly to say move to adjourn into executive session, discuss collective bargaining negotiations.
And personnel matters. Yeah, I wasn't making
Personnel matters.
sorry, I wasn't making the motion yet, but I want to make sure that before I make
Okay,
that motion,
whenever you do, you know, the obviously the budget relates to the upcoming collective bargaining negotiations. So
Right.
I would just, you know, that's obviously should just be part of the motion when at the time you try to make it. So.
yeah, thanks, John. Is everybody okay going into executive session, or is there anything else they want to talk about this for the budget? Okay, so then I move that we move to executive session to discuss the impact of certain items on the in the budget on the collective bargaining agreement negotiations, as well as some personnel matters.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, great. We have enough. Ayes, carry.
You're unmuted, Trustee Glenn.
So we have everybody here. I see the mayor.
Wait,
the Alan.
somebody's calling me. Hello?
Yeah, Sally, I was just going to mention you had your mic on.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, and we're back in public session now.
Oh dear. Well, I don't want it on.
Okay,
Turn it off, or
muted.
maybe Paul could do that for you. There, it's off.
It's muted.
Great. Is Trustee McHugh here?
So let's see, breakout rooms. You might be able to see if they're still in the breakout room if you click that on the bottom, or if they left the meeting.
No, it's not there.
Thank you. There's
We're
Trustee.
only missing Maureen.
Sorry. Maureen's, I think, calling back in. We got looped out there and I couldn't figure out how to get back in.
You're unmuted.
I didn't get an invite to join the public session again. How did I miss
It
something?
just happens automatically when I close the, I click on leave the breakout room and everyone returns to the regular session.
Oh, because I was still in the breakout room. I had to join.
Yeah, it doesn't automatically do it. You have to hit leave meeting and then it asks you if you want to go back into the main meeting.
It's
but
on the
neither-
lower right of your screen.
Yeah.
For the future.
All right. So sometimes people go to the same meeting and come back with different understandings. So if you recall, at our last meeting, we were talking about how to go back out to vendors and get contracts in place for the lakes management work for this upcoming season. My understanding of that was that we were going to essentially adopt the lakes manager's recommendations with respect to pond number 3, Weewa and Tuxedo Lake in terms of getting the pricing and the contracts firmed up, and then we could fine tune that a little bit, obviously going forward. Trustee McHugh thinks we had narrowed that a little bit. And the differences that we're really talking about were with respect to pond number 3. If you remember, the lakes manager had recommended dealing with herbicidal treatment to the entire lake, and also doing some dash harvesting at the southern end of the lake because the flow there was not conducive to the herbicidal treatment. Correct me if I'm wrong, Alan, but you thought we had left with the understanding of going out with purely a herbicidal treatment on pond 3. So that was one area, and the other area was Lakes Manager's recommendation in Tuxedo Lake of dash harvesting the high use areas, you know, around the dock areas, or not. Around the dock areas at the Village Boat Club and the Tuxedo Club. And there was some discussion during the meeting of not doing that because it was really not all that effective during the season. So
I'll give you my two comments. One is, I think, given Tuxedo Lake is water department, you know, I guess my view is, you know, the only thing we need to do right now is with regard to permitting, with regard to pond number 3, with regard to Purcell Car, everything else is on the table through Tuesday's discussion. Otherwise, why are we even putting it on the table with regard to a discussion point if we're going to ignore whatever people think or say?
well, I think the reason we need to just get an indication at the current time is because we need to go out to the vendors and ensure that if we're not gonna use any dash harvesting on pond 3, we have to tell the vendors that at this point, and we're really at the point in time when we're losing our ability to, you know, to retain them, I think. So.
I guess my attitude is, it's the nature of the beast. It's the nature of the beast of this budget discussion. It's the nature of the beast that we got our recommendations from NEAR so late that we haven't been able to have this discussion. So my view is 3 more days. It is what it is.
Well, so I guess we have different points of view there. So this is not obviously a final decision, but if, you know, our choices are we do nothing currently and let it sit a while longer, or we go out and, you know, solicit contracts from the vendors for doing stuff which can always be modified or restricted or cut back later. I'd recommend or suggest going out now. If the board prefers to wait, we can wait. But I think sort of need direction one way or the other on that.
Paul, do you have a dollar figure that would be helpful to us in terms of what we want to do in which lake? For example, pond 3, using the chemical plus the diving.
Sure.
And each of those items, and then doing I guess it would be diving for the coontail and the Weewa, and then doing the dash in the 2 locations that the consultant suggested. And in other words, when we pick and choose, can we put some numbers to those?
Well,
and then compare them to the budget?
So we did that. We did that in the last meeting. And the sort of the narrow issues here in terms of pond number 3 are Procelicor. The recommended treatment for pond 3 per NEAR, which is combined dash and Procelicor, would be about $14,000. The Procelicor only treatment for pond number 3, which is not recommended by our consultant, would be about $7,500. In terms of Tuxedo Lake, the 5 days of work around the 2 docks is about $11,000.
And that's certainly a temporary fix, as we know. It wouldn't, they probably won't get everything, and it'll be back next year, theoretically, based on what we've seen in the past by the dash vendors.
Yeah, but it's not even a fix. It's optics.
Right, yeah. Because we've had the dash several years in a row, I think, around those spots, and it's always back every year.
Correct.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that. I mean, I don't really have a strong feeling of, you know, in favor of doing the dash around the dock areas in Tuxedo Lake. What it does do is it stops some of those are high traffic areas. It chops up you know, the wheat quite a bit and fragments it more, but it's, you know, it's not a significant impact. I'm much more concerned about pond number 3 and you know, the consultant's recommendation for.
Yeah, if we're going to cut costs, we can stop the dash, is what you're saying, on pond 3. That'll cut it way down. And in terms of the main lake, I would just suggest, and I know this is, I think, so already been rejected, but just put the Priscilla Corps at the 2 boat clubs, period. No dash, no big, the entire lake, but just put the Priscilla Corps around those 2 spots. And that will do a better job, I think. Now, of course, that depends on whether the village would accept something like that. And what I recommended at the last meeting was, let's go out and start checking. Let's ask. Because that's the most, you know, that's the drinking water will probably have the most pushback.
Right. So, and I guess my position, and something I wanted greater granularity with from the lakes manager, is I'm far more in favor of doing all Priscilla Corps in pond number 3. The question is, would he change his position if we were able to increase the lake level in pond number 3 when we do the Priscilla Corps treatment in order to cover a greater area, which would then preclude us having to do the dash harvesting, which I don't think has been successful there. That's where my reluctance and hesitation stands with regard to that, because he keeps on dwelling on the south end of pond number 3. The question is, can we temporarily raise it? Priscilla Corps works very quickly, and by temporarily raising the lake, getting the treatment down quicker might be more cost effective, and 2, it might be a better way to tackle the Eurasian water milfoil. That's my hesitation, and I haven't got clarity or comfort with regard to that. That's where Paul and I differ. Or that's.
So I don't have an issue with that. My only issue is you know, we can reconfigure this different ways going forward, but we need to start getting our vendors in line. You know, we can ask for the contracts and then not follow through with them, but I think at a place of beginning is going out to the vendors and you know, with the lake manager's recommendations.
Why don't we make this easy, Paul? I'm happy with that, and I don't want to be an obstacle. If you're more comfortable taking that approach, I kind of, you know, this is a public setting, so if the lakes managers have already heard what our opinions are, and you know what, they've worked with us, so let's go out to them, and everything's subject to change, because, you know, we can increase the days with regard to, if we need to, with regard to coontail. I mean, there's so many questions out there right now, but if you think it's beneficial to ask for the contracts and then we just modify them, it is what it is. I mean, we're not bound to anything. So, you know, my approach was, let's know what exactly we want, and then go out. Well, yours is, let's show them that we want to commit to them, and we're just going to modify what the approach is. I think it's a strategy and a nuanced difference, but I'm more than happy for you to do that rather than have this conversation.
Fair enough.
So I'll tell you what my bottom line is in terms of accepting reductions for this. I would be willing to accept nothing being done in the Weewah, only using Priscilla Corps in pond 3, no dash, and doing absolutely nothing in the main lake, no dash, no chemical. That would be, as far as reduction, I'd be willing to go that far down. So just for the record there. And if we could all discuss what our tolerance might be, that might be a good starting point for us to come to an agreement.
Sorry,
So-
you want to have this discussion now?
You know, if we want to put this to bed because it's budget and we also have the timing, because for example, if we decide to go with dash, we would need to, I completely agree with Paul. We need to get those vendors locked in. Every day we wait, we risk not having them. So yeah, I think the sooner, the better we decide, for two reasons. One is the vendors, as Paul mentioned, the other is the budget. But you know, it's up to you. That's just my view, and I'm letting you know what I would accept in terms of reductions.
I'm not sure I do as an extreme approach as you just articulated, but that being said, I think we should leave it on the table through Tuesday evening. So at least it's a discussion point, or we agree now and then take it off the table for Tuesday evening. It's either or. Yeah,
understood. So just to refresh my memory, in the current cuts we just discussed that we are going to present to the community, did we do anything with the lake budget? Did we offer to take anything out of the lake budget?
Yes.
Do you remember what it was? I'm just trying to remember what we had cut.
So can I just make sure I have it right? I have $29,000, $11,000 for WEWA, and $14,000 for Pond 3, and $4,000 for removing the boom on Tuxedo Lake.
Right. Paul, I think that's what you mentioned, right?
Yes, I think that sounds right.
So I guess we have a choice of either putting that out to the public and letting them comment, or potentially coming to a conclusion now and then offering that to the public as a reduction choice. In other words, we plan to do nothing in WEWA and nothing in the main lake, and that will save us blank unless we get pushback.
So we went through this, I think, at the beginning of our session today in some detail. And if I recall correctly, because it was so long ago, we were talking about the approximately $11,000 for dash harvesting in WEWA this year versus the potential costs for letting that go and having to deal with that in future years. And obviously, we don't have a number on it, but we know how fast Eurasian water milfoil grows. We know what it was like in WEWA a couple of years ago. And we can see what it's like in Tuxedo Lake today. It costs about, I don't know, it costs, I think, about close to $10,000, an acre to deal with it when you let it grow. If we're planning not to treat that in the future, then, that might be a viable tactic to let it go this year. But my sense is that not spending that amount of money today is going to result in significantly greater costs in the future.
But didn't you say on the Big Lake it's reached a maximum, the milfoil, a total saturation, and it wouldn't matter if we left it a year?
Yeah, I'm talking about the WEWA.
Plus, to Paul's point, and I think it's an appropriate one, we got a windfall when we drew down the WEWA with regard to doing the dam construction, because we got rid of a lot of the Eurasian water milfoil. Now we have an opportunity to manage it at a low cost versus having what we have, which is at Tuxedo Lake, which is this, enormous problem and a huge cost. So obviously, we're talking lake size is totally different, but it's for a nominal cost, it allows us to manage one of our water bodies. So for that reason, I think the coontail is a bit of a question. Going after the Eurasian water milfoil, I think it's prudent for us to take care of that. Coontail, I'm not so convinced, and maybe it's something that we don't have the WEWA Fishing Club and we don't have the WEWA Beach Club open, and then those issues are less of an issue. I honestly don't know, but I mean, maybe no boating in that lake would help with regard to the coontail, but the coontail, from what I understand, is it's this kind of floating mass in the lake not rooted. So I don't think boats necessarily or swimming are going to have an effect one way or another. I think from a swimming, it's a nuisance perspective. My guess is for fishing, it's a nuisance perspective. But I wasn't that convinced. AJ, he wanted us to tackle it, but I wasn't necessarily sure it was the highest priority. Paul?
Fair, yes.
Do you guys want to try and put something on the table and vote, or do you want to table it? My preference would be to vote on a solution now if somebody puts one forward.
I prefer to give you a solution on Tuesday night where I'm, maybe Paul and I might have some meeting of the minds. If not, he and I will present divergent views, and then you guys can hear our arguments and see if they're persuasive or not. I guess that would be my response.
Very good. That sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
So, Paul, is there anything else you wanted to come back into public for this? We appreciate it. Well done. Is there anything else anyone has on the table
That's
they'd
all.
like to discuss before we adjourn?
Mayor, I'm here. Just if you had any questions, I don't know. I just popped back in. I'm surprised you're still here, but I figured I'd drop in.
Yeah, we already wrote you off, and
Oh, okay, very well.
we are dealing directly, exclusively with John now.
Oh, that
But
is
no, I
excellent.
appreciate you coming in. Does anybody have a question for Brian?
See, John did such a great job. You don't need me.
That's right.
So anyway, is everyone okay with me adjourning the meeting?
Yep.
Okay, I'd like to adjourn this meeting. May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
All right.
Ayes have it. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Stay safe, all.